In this video, we're going to discuss how to cite sources consistently, especially when you're using the same source for several sentences in a row within the same paragraph. The problem that I often see people having when they do that is that they wait until the last sentence in which they've used the source to begin citing it. And that's confusing because as the reader is reading those earlier sentences, they have no citation to tell them where that material came from until they hit that last sentence when it's too late. So instead, what you want to do is cite the source in the very first sentence in which you use it, and then cite it again in the very last sentence in a row in which you use it. And that will mark the beginning point and the end point for where you're using that same source over many sentences in a row. And then if you use the source again after that series of sentences, you need to cite it again, for example, if it comes up in another paragraph. So let's look at some examples here. Take a look at this passage on concussions in football by Craig A. Foster and others, and then read these two student examples, A and B, and see if you can tell which of those two cites that passage above more consistently. So pause the video and read through that. See if you can tell which is doing the better job of citing the source consistently, and then I'll give you my feedback. So you can pause the video now. Okay, so B does the better job of citing sources consistently. Let's first look at what A is doing wrong. So A is using a lot of material from that source above in these two sentences here as well as in the last one, but it doesn't cite the source, which is Foster and others, until the very end. So even though it had been using material all along, the reader doesn't know that that early material came from that source, especially because it's paraphrased. And so that's too late. That's not a clear citation. B does a much better job because it cites that source right after the very first sentence in which anything from it is used, and then it cites it again at the very end of the last sentence in which it's used. So it's very clear that from this sentence down through that sentence, all of that material is coming from Foster and others. So that is doing a better job of citing the source consistently. All right, let's look at one more pairing here. And this is an article on toxic masculinity by Peter Monaghan. And I'd like you to read that and then read the two student examples in C and D and see if you can see which of those two cites the source above more consistently. Okay, coming back, the one that cites more consistently is C. Both examples are using material from this source above, from the second sentence onward, right here and then here. The problem in D is you don't get a citation of Monaghan until the last sentence, and this is in the signal phrase for the quote. So as the reader is reading through all of this, they don't know where that came from because there's no citation. However, in C, there's a citation right in the very first sentence in which something from that source is used. And so the reader knows that from this sentence all the way through to this last sentence, where we also have a citation of Monaghan, that all of that is coming from this source. So again, the rule of thumb here is when you're using the same source for several sentences in a row, cite that source in the first sentence in a row in which you use it, either in a signal phrase at the beginning of that sentence or in parentheses at the end. and then cite that source again in the last sentence in a row in which you use it, again in either a signal phrase or parentheses. It's not wrong to cite it in every sentence in which you use it. If you aren't sure, if you feel it's not clear, you can go ahead and put those citations in. But at the very least, you need to cite it in the first and the last sentence in a row. And of course, if you are moving to other sources or have other material in between and you're not doing several sentences in a row, then you of course need to cite a source in any of those sentences that uses one. This is really just for situations where you're using the same source several times in a row, which, as I said, can often be a problem because people wrongly wait until the very last sentence to cite anything.